sexist or it isn't. Okay, so I think we've covered the preliminaries there.
Now, of course, the approach of some people towards misandry, the UTSU, for example, is to just try and define it out of existence. It doesn't exist. We define that it doesn't exist, so it doesn't exist. But now, both misandry and misogyny are very, very serious phenomenon. But for this discussion, you're mostly focusing on misandry, even though we're looking at creating a dialogue between the sexes and looking at both misandry and misogyny. You've chosen to mostly focus on misandry. Why is that?
Well, because nobody is monitoring it. People are ignoring it. So in order to be sure that we have two voices, and we're going to talk about our definition of dialogue in a few minutes, but dialogue by definition means two voices. And therefore, in order to have that, we have to see both sides of the coin.
Which meant we had to do a lot of scholarship, both for ourselves to understand what was going on, but also to create the platform for a conversation. If you don't have alternative studies that challenge some prevailing notions, if you have—
one might call them hegemonic motion.
If you— but you need good case studies, you need good data, you need empirical research, you need scholars working on all of this, and you have to bring all of that into some kind of public forum. And we chose to do it because we're academics through print, but other people have been doing it through the media. But somehow it needs to get out there in some form, and to do that you have to educate yourself and you have to educate others.
Back on the topic of people just trying to define misandry out of existence, some people have argued that sexism, also racism, can't exist unless people have a slightly nebulously defined power to act on it. As Biddle and Katz's very, very famous insert ism here equals power plus prejudice. That originally came from critical race theory, but it's now migrated into all sorts of things, including feminist theory. Because women are claimed to have no power, these people would say that women can't harm men, and thus women can't possibly be perpetrating misandry.
Well, now women do have power. They don't have total power. Probably nobody will ever should have total power, but they have power. And so it's up to men to study these issues and to think about them, and to just say because men have power, we can't talk about the problems of men, is
dishonest.
terrible. It's I don't know, just so crazy that it's happening. It's shocking, actually.
I mean, the mere fact that we're sitting here basically being held hostage by people ranting in the hallways indicates something about power. Who is the power here? We're two people. We're facing an audience of unknown people. We have people acting very threateningly. Where's the power here? Not with us. Now, I want to tell you a story about to illustrate that point about how words are defined in opportunistic ways. A few weeks ago, I was having a discussion with somebody, with a friend, about the definition of the word genocide. And he was very insistent that genocide, well, that the genocide of Jews by the Nazis was unique. And so that got into a whole discussion of what is unique, and of course every event is unique, every person is unique, even identical twins are unique. But he wanted to say that the Nazi genocide was uniquely unique. In other words, nothing could ever compare with it, and therefore nothing could ever be said that would challenge any theory about it. So he argued that, well, there's no such thing as genocide unless it's done by a state. Okay, so we have countless episodes in history in which people have exterminated each other, but unless you can prove that it was a state that did it, then what didn't count? Somehow it didn't matter. And you can go on like that. I mean, you could say, well, okay, it has to be a state, but it has to be a state with modern industrial and technological and bureaucratic mechanisms at its beck and call. So you can narrow it, and you can add more and more qualifications to be sure that your own territory, your own identity is protected. And I think that's opportunistic and it's intellectually dishonest.
Now, you've mentioned some of the key problems with the definition itself and the way of defining it. But one other thing, perhaps, to consider is that the question itself is flawed. The question is phrased as women, or rather the result is phrased as women cannot commit sexism against men. But of course, we have to acknowledge that sexism against men doesn't just come from women, right?
Oh yeah, it's true. There are plenty of men. Michael Kimmel is the obvious example. He's the poster boy for male feminism. And he wrote a book called Guyland, which I reviewed. It's an interesting book, actually. I can't say I recommend it, but I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then you decide for yourself whether you want to read it. His basic theory is that he's talking mainly about college campuses, so right away that's a kind of restricted part of the population. But he's basically saying that the boys who go to college, including many of you, are all potential rapists or would-be rapists, and the only reason you don't commit rape is because maybe you're afraid of the authorities or something like that. And he's arguing that all of this comes out of what he calls a sense of entitlement. That these boys have they believe that they're entitled to have hegemonic power, whatever words you want to use, patriarchal power. Now, I agree in a sense. I think that there is a sense of entitlement, but I believe that it's that they believe that they are entitled to a healthy identity as men, and that if you don't have a healthy identity, you cannot be a healthy citizen. So we'll talk about that later, but I'm just saying, Michael Kimmel, if you want an example of a male feminist, a male ideological feminist, mind you, because we distinguish between egalitarian and ideological feminists, that he's one.
I think in this context, we also have to remember that patriarchy has been the key concept of feminism. Everything that's ever gone wrong in history, or any problems that women have ever faced, are to be blamed solely on men and men's power. And that's where my historical interests and comparative interests go back to see if there's always patriarchy in every society. Are there not some societies that are egalitarian? And if so, how do they achieve that equality? I don't think women who ascribe to this mega theory of patriarchy want to see anything that will detract from it. It's such an easy answer. It brings all of men into one category. Very often there's a critique in postmodernism of essentialism, but basically there's no concept that's more essentialist than this word patriarchy for defining all history and not looking at the differences between times and cultures. So in our fourth book, where the manuscript exists, but it is currently under review, we take up a long view of history to test this theory of patriarchy. And we go back to the Paleolithic, the Neolithic, the Industrial Revolution, and we find that very often it's technological changes that come into human societies that then disturb existing social structures and bring in new ones, and that create problems. They solve some problems, they create some problems. But if we look at that history over a long period of time, we see that there's a gradual marginalization of the importance of the male body. So some of the current problems in our society come from an extreme form of feminism that blames everything on men and sees women as superior. But that's not the beginning of the problem that men face. That has really been a long historical problem as well. So there's deep issues of identity or loss of identity that converge now from different directions. But hold on to that word patriarchy means that you can now blame men for every single problem that exists. And it's not just the problems of women,